Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Welcome back to The Midnight Ride. Yesterday I tossed a book. I got about, I don't know, a quarter of the way through it. The writing was good, like the prose and everything. It moved at a good clip, which I always appreciate, but it just kept doom spiraling around a certain type of content that I'm not a huge fan of. So the book is called The Hot Kid by the late Elmore Leonard. He wrote 3:10 to Yuma, which was a short story. They later spun it into a full feature with Christian Bale and Russell Crowe. I've tried reading a couple of other books by him, though, and they kind of all end up in the same place, namely that he'll pause the narrative and the focal characters and stuff to just randomly over focus on sexual content. And this was probably the final straw with Elmore Leonard books. Like I've just lost interest in pursuing what is otherwise a thread of good storytelling from a talented writer. I read probably a year and a half ago a book of his called Maximum Bob. It was kind of a funny title, and it was set, I think, in the Florida Everglades, and there was this judge. His name was Robert something or other, but he was notorious for throwing the book at criminals and giving them full sentences for everything, hence he got the nickname Maximum Bob. And apparently the story is about him getting stranded in the Everglades with a whole bunch of different criminals and organizations hunting him down while he's like strung out on substances or whatever. I thought, okay, there is some comedic potential there. And I had read 3:10 to Yuma, so I knew that Elmore Leonard had the chops that I like in writing as well. There's a lot of overlap between his style of writing and, well, some Louis L'Amour type stuff and some Carl Hiaasen, who I've also enjoyed, but same thing, like he tends to get into the sexual content too much. So I tried that one, and it said, like, I bailed because about a quarter of the way into the book, the narrative just overly focused on Bob's philandering and cheating on his wife and leaving his wife for a sex kitten girl and then getting tired of her. And it's like, okay, I don't need this many tawdry details of his philandering. It's enough to establish and to understand that this guy is romantically unfaithful and has this vice that can compromise him. Going into such extensive detail about it it's just beyond the pale. Like, there's a word for it that's not coming to me right now while I'm about to hit this climate protester, and deserved it. It's the same thing happened with The Hot Kid. The premise of The Hot Kid is this is the nickname of a lawman who's young and kind of like up and coming in the trade, and has a bit of an ego on him. He's got a tendency to brag, but he gets the job done. His name is Carl Webster, and this is set in 1920s Oklahoma. So, okay, cool, bit of Homerism. I can recognize town names and stuff. It's Prohibition era, so there's going to be some moonshine and some speakeasies and all that going on, and he's chasing old-fashioned bank robbers. This is when bank robbing was tremendously easy. You walk in with a gun, you empty the till, the tray, the vault, whatever you can get, and you're set for a while, and all people have to go off of is a description. There's no security cameras, nothing of that sort. Well, we get an introduction to Carl, the eponymous lawman, the hot kid, when he's 15, and his first encounter getting held up at gunpoint, and how that kind of steers him into wanting to be a lawman. And then he goes through the training and everything, and he starts hunting down a bank robber. And then suddenly the story goes sideways, and we focus not just on this bank robber, but on his girlfriend, and how when she was underage, she would get cigarettes from local boys by going out into the woods and doing stuff. And then she would write to a boy that she thought was cute, but he was in prison. And there were details on the stuff they wanted to do, and how she ended up getting involved with a different prisoner, and they got up to stuff. And then she became a madam and running a brothel. And let's get into the fine intricacies of how you handle men in the waiting room who want their turn and with a girl in the back and stuff. I'm like, what is this? What the hell is this? What is the purpose of this? It became so overly focused on that we completely lost the thread of what was going on with Carl Webster, the lawman who's supposed to be hunting these people down. And finally, I put the book down. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm done with this one. And it just got me thinking. I was like, okay, where's my threshold? Because obviously I've read books that have sexual content in them, and my thinking is that it's got to serve a narrative purpose and a character purpose to the story. And from there, like, it only needs to go so far. My standard is that there are two types of writers, those who write sex and those who have sex, and never the twain shall meet. But what is the purpose of going into such excessive detail if not just to be, what's the word, like scintillating and sensational, and to grab people's attention with something cheap and quickly accessible? I think about the scene at the end of Golden Sun, the second Red Rising book, where Darrow and Mustang got in the sack, and there was some detail, but we didn't have to go into it too extensively, and it did serve both a narrative purpose and a character purpose, because there was this tension between them, this give and take throughout the story, mainly because Darrow had a secret, and if he let Mustang get too close to him, then she would figure it out, that he's actually this long con spy character who's trying to overthrow the pyramid that she's a system of. And that if he got entangled with her, it would complicate his mission and his focus. But then they finally get there, and they have sex, and then things get complicated and tricky, which, spoiler, by the end of the third book, he finds out that in that encounter, he got her pregnant. And she had a son, and she went and hid and gave birth to the kid, and then kept the child hidden from the entire world. And the whole third book was, after they spent some time away from each other, he meets up with her again, and she's wary, and she's making assessments and stuff, and he finds out at the end, like, that he's got a son, and the entire thing was like her deciding whether he was husband material and father material, and whether he would be better off not knowing that he had a child. Like, it worked for the story. It was a fantastic reveal. It was one of those things that turns at the end of the story, and suddenly it makes you rethink everything that Mustang had done in the third book, like, leading up to that point. A great turn of hand, a great plot twist, fantastic. And so it validated in a different way the choice to show them, like, getting into bed and doing the deed. But again, it wasn't excessively detailed about what links in where and stuff. Like, my threshold is, give us the implication, close the bedroom door, the rest of it's up to us. Sex needs to be something special, and that specialness of it is lost through turning it into an entertainment product. The same thing goes with anything else that, like, is meant to draw a visceral physical response from the reader. It's the same reason why I don't read excessively detailed gore. It serves no purpose other than to just be masturbatory on the part of the writer and the reader. Going back to the Red Rising example, this was my departure from the later books in the series because the story was largely abandoned in service of just finding excessively gruesome and detailed ways to humiliate, murder, and desecrate people. Just for the sake of showing, well, I'm a big boy because I can write this, and the reader saying, I'm a big boy, I'm a big girl because I can read this, and this is good. It's not in service of anything other than just for doing it for its own sake. And when that question enters the equation, you got to ask yourself, like, what is the purpose of consuming this as entertainment at all? Stephen King said, and you guys know, like, I'm not a Stephen King reader, but I read his On Writing book, and if there's anything I'm going to learn from the guy, it's going to be about his writing. He learned after his cocaine addiction and his alcoholism and beating his vices and focusing on his craft and why he did it. He said, art is a support system for life and not the other way around. So what is the purpose of me reading something like this if it's not going to improve me or edify me as a person and as a reader? Does reading excessive gory details or sexual details of fictional characters augment me or make me better in any way? It does not. There's a trend in the reels and the TikToks and the shorts and stuff whenever like the romantasy genre comes up. It is smut. It is Harlequin romance novels for the current generation. It is pornography. And the only difference between this fairy smut stuff that girls read and the hardcore pornography, which is largely catering to a male audience, is that one of these is shunned as it ought to be for the men, and one of them is celebrated as it ought not to be for the women. They are both the same thing. There is a double standard. Neither of them is good for anybody, and yet we make jokes about one, and the other is a societal taboo. These things do not exist in a vacuum, and they do have a negative and detrimental effect on us as people. Look up the effect of, PIE, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which is a direct result of people consuming too much pornography, although this physically manifests more in men. The more you consume these things conceptually, the more it damages you physically. It alters your ability to have a response to these things as it would be appropriate in the real world. The same thing would happen with consuming excessive violence and gore, is it numbs you and desensitizes you to it, which is to the negative effect on us personally and societally. It doesn't work. It's not good for us. It's not healthy for us. It makes us all worse off consuming these things too lightly when we ought to take them more seriously and more gravely. So those are my thoughts on that. Like, why do I have these thresholds? Why do I have these standards in place? Like, obviously I am a religious person, and the religion and my upbringing and all that has a bearing on it, but I'm not walking into this standard blindly. There's a reason why I uphold these things and why I curate the content that I consume with an eye to this. At the end of the day, when I'm reading fiction, I do want to be entertained, but I also want to be built up. If I was only looking to be entertained, I would look for just the easiest and cheapest thing that had the barest and thinnest definition of a plot and a character, and I wouldn't look for anything unique to surprise me or to intrigue me or anything like that. I would just look for something bland and pointless to pass the time. I'm also looking to be edified. Same goes with nonfiction. It's a slightly different threshold and standard for nonfiction, but the same thing. Like, I wouldn't go and read a nonfiction that was excessively detailed about violence, profanity, sex, all that stuff, just because presenting those things in the written word, it changes the impact that they have in the real world, and we ought to shield ourselves from that. I think so that when we do encounter these things in reality, in life, we have the proper response to them. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Check the description for relevant links. Find my books on Amazon. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.